Candyman was directed by Nia DaCosta, and it is officially produced by Jordan Peele. The plot to Candyman is basically it's a spiritual sequel to the original, and it follows very similar story beats in the sense that the main character, Anthony, who is an artiste, is writing a story on the Candyman. He discovers the town that he was originally haunting, and he becomes intrigued and very psychotic about it, eventually leading into the revival of the Candyman. Hopefully I didn't say it 5 times while giving that synopsis. Alright, let me just come out and let's just say it right now because I'm not gonna bullcrap you guys. Shoot! I love this movie. This movie is really, really good. I thought it was really well done. And there are obviously some issues. I'm gonna touch on that throughout the review. But what I'm gonna be doing first is comparing to how I think this one and the original compare before I get into more of the technical things going on in this movie. So there's a lot of similarities in the messages that both of these Candyman movies are trying to touch on. And it's funny because I got a screening of this yesterday night. I went to a 7 o'clock showing at a really late time, got out, and I was about to shoot a review yesterday, but there was no way I could really put together a review for this because this is a very thought-provoking film, much like the original Candyman. The Candyman has never been a horror movie per se. It's always been more of a psychological drama, an intense film, and something that talks about societal issues, specifically discrimination against black folk or black people. And much like the original, this Candyman very much does that. It basically talks about something that is very much relevant today. Police violence against black people and a lot of things that happen in discrimination against black people and not taking a person at their word and just diving head in. And whereas the original Candyman was more of a study on how white folk can profit off the suffering and the pain of black people and the unnecessary suffering that black people have endured for years, which is something that this film also does, but it kind of teaches it in a different way and touches on stuff that's more relevant now. Which, in that regard, I would say the original Candyman was much more timeless, but this one, in my opinion, is more relevant now, but it's not going to be as relevant going further down the road. I find it very fascinating how both these movies, both the original and the modern, have different takes on the discrimination against black folk and the violence against black folk. And they basically tell it from 2 different sides, but essentially the same coin. And in some ways, this movie is much better than the original. In some ways, it's not better than the original. The original, in my opinion, is a message masterpiece more than a masterpiece in horror. It really gets its message across in the original, and this one does the same, but I don't feel it does it as strongly as the original, but it's still very powerful the way they do it. Jordan Peele and Nia DaCosta especially, I gotta applaud them because they absolutely knew what they were doing in this movie. In regards to the pacing of the movie, it is much, much better than the original. The original was much more of a slow burn. It didn't like getting into stuff. It didn't like just getting into like the stuff that was just interesting. It liked to slow things down, provide a lot of exposition. But this movie provides exposition, but does it in the form of showing rather than telling with a lot of stuff. I mean, they tell you, but they show it as well. For example, the artistic liberties of this film that it takes, which I'll touch more on this later, they use shadow puppets to tell the story of what happened in the town and what happened to these people. And they do this while telling the story to keep you engaged instead of keeping a slow burn, and it keeps the momentum going. And in that regard, I would also say this movie is also a little bit too short, which is a contradiction of what I said because I like the pacing more than the original, but I feel like it's a little bit too short. Even though it gets into stuff quicker, it's a little bit too short, and I feel like it could develop the story a little bit further. And Candyman was never originally a horror movie per se. It was a psychological thinker with horror elements in it, but it was never a straight up one and through horror film, slasher film, or anything like that. So if you're going into this expecting to see a bunch of kills and Candyman going on a killing rampage and, oh, we gotta stop the Candyman. You're really not gonna get that with this one, okay? So don't even try. And touching more on the artistic stuff that I mentioned earlier, this film is gorgeous. And it's funny because the film has a very interesting choice of there just being a lot of stuff that's related to art. For example, Anthony views the stuff that he's doing or that happened in the town, he reflects and tries to get the message out through his art. Meanwhile, the shots in this movie are very much like art. Shadow puppet moments, that's art. They have a lot of moments in this movie that are very artistic, and I applaud Nia DaCosta for doing that in this movie. If she does this with the next Marvel movie that she's set to direct, we're in for a major treat. A lot of eye candy. See what I did there? Okay, just don't unsubscribe. Now my biggest issues happen to be with the way they give out the message. I feel like it's a little bit too on the nose at moments, especially with this portrayal of white characters to get this message out. They make them extremely uppity and very bushy. Like, let me tell you that right now. I'm telling you this right now. I know there's white folk that act like that out there, but for the most part, I haven't seen a lot of, like, especially when it's everybody. Like, I'm not talking about when they're in the art galleries talking to people and critiquing each other's art going, this sucks, but, you know, at least, you know, no one could see it. Yes. No, all of the white people in this movie are acting like that, and including the police. And I'm just kind of like, you guys are basically making white people seem like evil just to try and get the message of discrimination against black people out. That's not the way to go about it. And it really goes over the top, especially going into its finale. The finale, I'm not going to spoil it, but there is a particular character in the cop car incident, and he says something to one of the people, which I kind of rolled my eyes at, and I was like, come on now, y'all are just doing too much. And essentially that has to do with the issues I have with this movie. There's a couple others that I want to touch on when I do a spoiler video, but for the most part, the good far outweighed the bad in this one. I mean, when the bad happened, I was mostly looking past that because Nia DaCosta and Jordan Peele have a wonderful script that touches on discrimination and violence against black people while also delivering the goods when it comes to essentially doing a horror movie. And in that regard, I would say Candyman is a great film. If you guys have not seen this movie, make sure you guys check it out in the theater. Thank you guys once again for clicking on the video. I have a ton more videos coming out, trust me on that, and I have a bunch of retrospective reviews that I'm going to be doing into fall. I was supposed to be doing it this summer, but hey, better late than never. But if you guys like the video, make sure to subscribe today to join the Isaiahization. And remember, kids, don't say Candyman 5 times in the mirror, otherwise a big black guy in a pimp coat will come and hook you. That didn't come out right.